was you're mentioning that it's important for us to have new challenges, because with new challenges, it assumes that the old problems and the old challenges have been resolved. So to conclude that we are somewhat moving in the right direction. Dr. Phakeng, I'm going to have to stop with you there, and we'll come back to you afterwards once other speakers have spoken to engage further questions. Reverend Mabelane, thank you so much, Dr. Phakeng. Reverend Mabelane, we're going to be engaging you next, but we prepared a little intro so that our guests can get a good sense of who you are, and we'll engage after that. Thank you, Reverend. Okay, we're just experiencing a bit of a technical glitch, but I have an intro here for the Reverend. Reverend Solema Belane is no stranger to us at the SABC. He is well accomplished with a master's degree in theology of South Africa. He is also a former television producer, presenter, and continues to be a pastor. While at the SABC, he continues to do the work, and today he'll be speaking to us about religious and cultural diversity over the weekend. Please take us through your take. Thank you. Before you come in, I just want to clarify that I'm using Dr. Themba Mnguni's laptop, but my name is Nhlanhla Songwane. Apologies for that. Reverend, the floor is yours.
Unmute,
and
Reverend.
You are on mute,
Unmute.
Reverend. If you can please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear, Reverend. Got you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I would like to firstly thank the factual and religious departments for putting together this webinar, but in particular for considering me to make a contribution from my own experiences. I would like to actually share just about 4 points, because I'm going to touch on the journey that the religious department went through the transformation process as the country was going through transformation itself, with our democracy maturing. And I think to contextualize this, let me just start by saying, as you briefly said, Nhlanhla, I got involved in religious broadcasting in the early days, around 1990 or so, as a presenter of a program that was a Sotho-based Christian magazine, a factual program. And later on got recruited as a producer, and later on, as you mentioned, I became the head of the department in 1992. And I think that's where my experience in terms of the journey that the religious department went through came through to fruition, because in 1993, a new board, a democratic board, or the first democratic board of the SABC was appointed. And that board was mandated with the sole task of transforming the SABC. And being the newly appointed head of religious department, I was told in no uncertain terms that our religious broadcast, which by then was so Christocentric, has got to transform as in yesterday. And the sharing that I'm going to sort of present here has more to deal with that journey than anything. I don't know if you prefer that I share the points on the screen, but otherwise, like I say, there are 4 points I'm going to use for this 8 minutes or so. Do you want me to share the points on the screen, or shall I just speak about them?
Robert, whatever you're more comfortable with,
okay,
we'll be happy.
I think I'm comfortable, and if you are comfortable, I'm comfortable to continue without necessarily having to go through the PowerPoint on screen.
So
the department by then was Christocentric, as I indicated, and it had about a staff of over 40 personnel, and all of them obviously Christian, doing the various programs of over 500 minutes a week. Then, as I indicated in 1993, just talking about the transformation mandate and the journey of the religious department, in 1993, the first board of the SABC, led by Dr. Ivy Matsipi Kaseburi, gave us instruction as a department to do whatever it takes with our expertise and our networks, and to get the nation involved to transform the department. What happened after that was a series of workshops across the country with the African religious communities, with the Jewish communities, the Hindu community, the Islamic community, you name them all. We conducted workshops across the landscape of the country, getting a sense of what each religious community would have preferred in a society where everybody is equal and there's religious freedom in the real meaning of the word. After those workshops, the SABC board mandated us to then engage those same religious communities to forward names of people that could potentially be appointed to form what was called then the RBP, which was a religious broadcasting panel, essentially. So the job of this panel was simple: to do what the board needs to do for the religious portfolio. And if I may just share snippets from what the role of this board was. The board actually enabled us to craft a policy which was called the Religious Broadcasting Policy. And this policy editorially was informing every religious program that was put on air, post the Christocentric kind of programs that were broadcast before. The policy says, among others, I'm just going to quote one of the key statements in there. It says, as a public broadcaster, the SABC has an obligation to provide religious programs and to broadcast religious material in a manner that is unbiased and representative of South Africa's religious plurality. In so doing, the SABC seeks to promote mutual respect for religious beliefs among the country's different religious groups. The SABC religious programming should therefore reflect South Africa's major religions, whilst allowing expressions of those other religions that are not regarded as in the majority to also express themselves on both television and radio. For the purpose of the policy, major religions were regarded as Christianity, African religion, Islam, Hinduism, and Judaism. And specific objectives that we were to achieve with this policy included sensitivity to the diverse nature of South African society, the need for justice and healing and reconciliation, compassion and concern for human dignity and for all life, including the earth, a common South Africanness, integrity, transparency, and trust in all relationships, commitment to the independence of the autonomy of the SABC within the parameters of the accountability to the South African public, and a spirit of cooperation between the SABC and religious communities. Now, this policy essentially so guided us that going forward, after the RBP was established, and after the policy was approved by both the RBP and the board itself, we had to implement the policy. And that was quite a task. I must say it enriched our experience of experiencing diversity in this country, because through those workshops that I talked about, then we had to essentially headhunt people whose qualifications put them forth as potential producers, potential content commissioning editors from those different faiths. I can actually share here with you that people like the current head of religion, Yashika Singh, when I met her in Durban at the university where she just completed her honors, it was an amazing experience of me being engaged with the Hindu community, to the extent that people like Professor Dango introduced me to the student body, whereby I met somebody like Yashika Singh, and one thing led to another, and she was appointed as our Hindu program specialist, commissioning editor. And so we did with every one of them: the African religion, Islam, Judaism. Mark himself is a testimony to that process. So we worked very hard then to get every religion, at least as recognized by the policy, to come to the fold and to help us to craft programs which will address the South African diversity in terms of culture, religion, and the moral fiber of our nation. And this portfolio that we put together as a new multi-faith department, religious department, no longer Christocentric but multi-faith, brought about quite a number of programs that I think they played their critical role in building our democracy and our society. These include programs like The Big Question, which engaged audiences from different walks of life to debate issues of national interest. The Gospel Gold, which became a platform, a popular program that became a platform for growing gospel in our country. Issues of Faith, a series of high-quality documentaries on current affairs and topical issues. And Chat Room, one of the youthful programs which allowed young people to engage on issues that matters most for their future in this country, on socio-economic, political milestone as our democracy was maturing. We provided profiles of movers and shakers of our South African moral fiber. This included profiles on people like Archbishop Tutu, Professor Fatima Mia, Professor Gabriel Sitilwani, etc., which were broadcast during different times, of course. Highlights of the contributions that we made in the social dialogue included high-quality award-winning productions. And I'm just going to mention a few which really made their own contribution in terms of the social dialogue in this country. Programs that were done on a high profile, on a high quality and delivery platforms. These included The Letter and Good Vibrations, which promoted peace and harmony in the world at such festivals as AIBD. Other programs such as the Global Warming and Faith, which won the Old Mutual Awards for Best Documentaries, Best Editing, Best Scripting, as a program of faith reflecting on global warming. The genre also won Best Variety Awards at the SAFTAs for Gospel Unplugged, nominations in Best Documentary and Best Talk for I Am Human Leap of Faith series. Fame from Faith was a soccer and faith series produced during the World Cup in 2010. Badimo, the African Spirituality series on art, music, and indigenous knowledge, won SAFTA awards twice. With all these programs and content, we don't have doubt that the religious programs since the past 30 years, after the transformation that was started in 1993 by the First Democratic Board, played their fair share in our social dialogue to bring democracy to where we are today as a nation, specifically in inspiring the moral fiber of our nation. As we all know, the majority of South Africans profess to be believing in some deity or other. And for that reason, our ethics, our norms, our values as a nation, the democracy that we are building cannot survive or be built without the kind of input that the religious dialogue um, uh, these programs have been serving. However, we have had our own challenges, I think, as a nation regarding the SABC providing religious programs. And the challenge, firstly, was brought by the fact that as early as 1986, pay TV was introduced in South Africa. And in 1995, Mnet, which was the pay TV, introduced another company, a subsidiary company called MultiChoice, which later on introduced DSTV. Now, with the flood of digital television products in the marketplace, with so much competition, and ETV was already on the market, the SABC started to feel the crunch and the pressure of fulfilling its public service mandate. And I think in 1996, just before I wrap up, before my time's up, in 1996, McKinsey was brought in to help SABC streamline its operations to ensure that SABC can perform competitively in that space where so many players have come to take their position, like DSTV, as I've mentioned. So the SABC gradually changed into a commercial-orientated enterprise with less and less emphasis on its public service mandate, in particular religion. And we started to find the religious department from over 500 minutes a week of content that was aiming to contribute in the social dialogue of the nation. That content had to be reduced gradually over the years because of budgetary constraints. The question is how religion will continue to play its pivotal role in the consolidation of our democracy when resources on the public broadcaster are becoming more and more constrained in the face of the digital competition space. The creative staff of the current SABC religious unit, I believe, have got a challenge, together with the channels, obviously, that they should come up with strategies that, in spite of these constrained resources, that should enable the broadcaster to continue to play or to broadcast its public service mandate, which includes religious broadcast or religious programs, should still find it possible to accommodate religious programming in spite of these challenges that SABC is facing today. However, with these challenges being presented as they are and being experienced by the current religious department, where the budgets aren't as exponential as they used to be 20 years ago, I think it is still imperative that for the South African social dialogue to be enriched and never lack in achieving its goals of maturing our democracy going forward, we will have to creatively ensure that in the bouquet that the SABC is providing the public, religious content in whatever format that is affordable and creatively engaging our people for a moral fiber that makes us all proud to be South Africans will have to be found. That solution, I guess, lies in the hands of our creative staff, the SABC channels, and the religious community to support wherever we can. I think I'll pause there, Nkatla.
Thank you so much, Reverend. And I think I don't think I do know that I do have you to thank, for SABC diversifying their religious programming, so much so that now you can even find people with long dreadlocks like myself. So thank you for that, Reverend. Religion played a big role, especially during the anti-apartheid struggle, through key players like Bishop Tutu, Trevor Huddleston, Frank Chikane, what role do you see religion playing over the next 30 years? And maybe, okay, let me keep that separate. But what role do you see religion playing going forward? Is the community becoming more secular, or is there still a role for religion and or more so spirituality, Reverend?
Yes, Nhlanhla, like I said in my ending, that whichever way we go, in spite of the highly competitive environment that SABC is facing as a public broadcaster, we will have to find ways that religious content will continue, because religion has got to play a role going forward. If you look at what's happening every day in our society, you look at the news every morning, every evening, during midday with all the news bulletins, you hear about children being raped, you hear about grandmothers being killed by their grandsons. Essentially, you hear about morality declining every day. And we as South Africans, and we are not talking on behalf of another country, we talk as South Africans, we confess the belief in life, the choice for life. The majority of us as South Africans, we believe in a value system that is informed by our various religious and cultural belief systems. And we cannot, as a nation, for once believe that we can continue to build this democracy. We can continue to build this country economically and otherwise, educationally, etc., without the moral fiber, without the moral regeneration, which is informed by the various religious communities' content and education, which is found in their mosque and their churches, but obviously broadcasting playing a critical role. So yes, the role that the likes of Bishop Tutu, Huddlestone, Chikane, you name them, Dr. Busak, etc., the roles that they played, the church is still playing today, and the church must actually hold government accountable. The church is the watchdog that, over and above all the other institutions that are trying to keep government at bay in terms of corruption and service delivery, etc., the religious community should be in the forefront, because actually, just quoting from the Bible, and I know that the Quran and the Old Testament of the Jewish community and the various other religions, especially Buddhism, they will attest to this. We all promote a better life for everyone, equality for everyone as religions. And the absence of a religious dialogue in our social dialogue as a nation will definitely bring more disaster. Currently, I don't think any one of us is happy with what's happening with the rate of crime and immorality in our country, and the voice of religion will have to come out more stronger. And the platform of the SABC is much more important and critical in reaching us all with that voice of morality and diversity.
Okay. Thank you, Reverend. Reverend, we've got a question from YouTube here for you. What, in your opinion, are the roles of religious leaders in promoting democracy and social cohesion?
Well, partly I've touched on that. The religious community believes that oppression is a sin. And that's why I didn't mention this, and maybe our audience may not be aware, but one of the strongest condemnation against apartheid that actually brought apartheid down, which obviously was led by the likes of Bishop Tutu, Frank Chikane, etc., was the fact that apartheid is a sin, was the fact that segregation is a sin, was about the fact that the true religion teaches about taking care of human life and protecting human life. And therefore, religious leaders currently who are having the opportunity to lead their various communities, and where they are called upon to come on the platform like SABC to speak to the nation, should definitely infiltrate this morality, this education that says equality and justice and righteousness should be practiced by all of us, retribution, etc. So if there is no voice of justice that is coming from the religious community to support whatever political call for justice, etc., then we can be just as hopeless, because we strongly believe, from a religious perspective as a community, we strongly believe that South Africans' success as a republic, as a nation, is based, among others, of course, the education that we so aspire and work towards, and the politics that we so wish they should work for us, government of national unity, etc. All that, service delivery. But we believe the religious voice, our leadership in the religious communities, the rabbis, the imams, the bishops, when they come together, the likes of your South African Council of Churches, when their voice is heard, and where else can they be heard better than on SABC? If you invite Reverend Bumlwana, Bishop Bumlwana, or Bishop Mahoba for that matter, or any of the chief rabbis from the Jewish community, to speak out on television to the whole nation, I can assure you that that voice vibrate into our moral fiber system, to the point that as a nation, we are hopeful that our religious belief systems as a nation have got a role to play in building us into the South Africa that we want to be proud of.
Thank you, Reverend. And then one more question from YouTube, asking, during your tenure here at the SABC, if you can use the religious genre as a microcosm of the rest of the country, how were you able to manage conflict, orchestrate all of that, and come up with a fully functional multi-faith genre?
Ganda, you were breaking there. I'm not sure it's my network or it's just the system. I didn't hear everything you said, but I think your question is how we have managed to bring religion to be a functional unit in spite of the challenges, especially with the diversity that was required.
Yes, and more in particular, how did you manage conflicts, not only just across the different faiths, but interdenominational conflicts between your Catholics and your, like the different denominations? What was your experience?
Oh yes, when we drafted, and I was personally actually the first draft of the policy. I was tasked by Dr. Ivy Matsipi Kazeburi to come up with a draft of where do I think religion should go, and I put together that draft policy, which then we workshopped together as staff, and then we workshopped as with the RBP and the communities, and finally it became a policy. But the core of that policy was saying no one should undermine the other person's religious belief system, and no one should, one way or another, directly or indirectly, demean any religious belief. So our participants in religious programs were made aware that, look, immediately, you may not believe in ancestral worship, for instance. You may not believe in the Islamic faith or Rastafarian faith, etc. But immediately you come on television, you abide by the policy which says you will respect those religions for who they are and speak within your space what you believe in without questioning the belief system of the next person. And that worked so well for us that there are two programs I can remember we had to take them off the screen. One was a commercial program, paid for program, which was performing miracles and stuff like that, and basically coming against the policy that was respecting other religions. And we had to take it off because editorially what protected us and guided us was simple. You celebrate your faith and you live together with your neighbor in peace without criticizing them. If anything, you walk your faith together with them in a multi-faith perspective or journey. And that enabled us to find it possible for various denominations to work together, for various religious groupings to work together. And the fact that we had the religious broadcasting panel, leaders of authority, the likes of Trikamji from the Hindu community, the likes of Bishop Dungani from the Christian community. The fact that we had those religious communities, I mean those leaders from the religious communities, helping us to manage any potential conflict. We worked so harmoniously with all religious communities to the point that up to date, well, Yashiga can attest maybe if there has been since I left the SABC, but to date, I have never heard that religious programs were a point of conflict after being broadcast. We have successfully broadcast religion to the satisfaction of all the religions that were represented, in spite of the limited time that airtime or broadcast time that we had available for each religion. So that's how we managed it. The policy helped us.
Thank you, Reverend. Just quickly, Reverend, before I let you go, inclusivity, the SABC has done a good job in far as that is concerned. But inclusivity came under question, I don't know if you saw during the opening night of the Paris Olympic Games with the Last Supper. So I don't know if you have any comment on inclusivity versus exclusivity.
Look, I've seen the clip, the opening. It's sad, I must say, and I guess if the religious voice were to speak in South Africa, they will say what I'm saying. I believe strongly that it's sad, not because the producers of that clip were displaying inclusivity, especially in France, where they wanted to show that all people are equal, etc., etc. But because they decided to do that using Christianity as a platform, using a most sacred imagery of the Last Supper, which is a very, very sacred event for the Christian faith. Using it was more ridiculing Christianity than displaying the inclusivity in one way or another. I think creativity is an unlimited field where the producers could have found ways to still do this without necessarily. I mean, you can imagine, Klantla, you can imagine if, and peace be upon the Prophet Muhammad, just imagine if they used Prophet Muhammad's imagery and they did something controversial like they did with the Last Supper. Obviously, I think the Islamic faith community will be up in arms to say, how dare you? Because that name is sacred to their faith, and we should respect that. You don't speak about Prophet Muhammad so easily, peace be upon him. You do not display your opinion by using other belief systems or other people's ideas by ridiculing them, because that is not displaying inclusivity. That is basically just being controversial. So I think the producer, and I saw he was trying to defend why he produced that clip in the manner he did. He may have done that for another audience, but as South Africans, I'm not an archbishop to speak on behalf of the Anglican Church or somebody else, but speaking from my experience as a former broadcaster from a religious perspective, as South Africans, that is very sad that they use Christianity for carrying a message of inclusivity in France. And if they think it's working for the world, it definitely is not working for us as South Africans.
Thank you, Doctor. I do hear what you're saying, and we all know how Salman Rushdie was received after his book, The Satanic Verses. Reverend, thank you for your participation and for being with us. Please join us just in case there are, please stay with us rather, just in case there are a few more questions at the end of the webinar. For those who are still with us, my name is Nhlanhla Hlongwane. We're going to move on to Dr. Ntando Sindane, who's going to be talking to us about law, justice, and the Constitution. We're going to play a short clip by way of introducing Dr. Ndando Sindane. Thank you. Teaches public international law and research methodology for law students. Previously, he taught African customary law, private international law, and legal pluralism. His research interests are in the areas of intellectual property rights and the philosophy/sociology of law. Today, Dr. Ndando Sindane will share insight into the workings and intricacies of law, justice, and constitutional law.
Yeah, I don't know if I should start speaking. Is that my cue, Nhlanhla?
Dr. Sindane, thank you for. Yes, it is your cue. Apologies for the sound of the recording, but absolutely, Doctor, that is your cue. The floor is yours.
All right. No, thank you very much. I want to greet everybody who's here, fellow panelists, those that I don't know and those that I know. Of course, familiar faces such as Professor Pakeng, and then also thank the opportunity to be invited to speak here. I must also acknowledge that some of my students at the University of the Western Cape might be watching, the third year law students. So I greet them because they are my source of inspiration and my pride and joy in these trying times. Must also greet my partner on this National Girlfriend's Day. All right, now let's get to serious
Yes,
issues.
please, by all means.
Yeah, hello, baby. No, now let's get to serious issues. I think just like Reverend Mabilane, I'm also used to speaking and only stopping when I'm done. So when I've exceeded my 10 minutes, Nhlanhla, just wave at me, because you know us lecturers, we don't stop, we go on and on. So I want to reflect a little about the constitutional question after 30 years of democracy. And I'll say three things really about the Constitution, its effect, its impact, its legacy. And then the fourth thing, I'll just gloss over some of the critiques or the criticisms against the Constitution. And then I'll respond to a question that I think might come. But before I do that, I want to begin with, I listened to a short speech by the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, His Excellency Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa. And he said something that got me thinking. And of course, some of the things was saying them in Shona, but there's one thing that he said in English that stuck with me. And he said that this freedom that we enjoy, talking about the freedom that they enjoy in Zimbabwe, or this black government that they are in Zimbabwe, is not something that was given to them. People died, people were killed, people were displaced, people were raped, maimed, dispossessed, thingified. You know, he even says that some of them had to go to prison, spend decades in prison. And for me, that rang home how the question of freedom from colonialism, is something that is similar to us in South Africa. We share that with many Africans, even outside of South Africa. And of course, this is an argument that is echoed by our local intellectual interlocutors. You count Senior Counsel Advocate Tembeka Ngcukaitobi, you count Professor Andre Odendaal, who wrote a biography of Oliver Tambo. You count people like former Justice of the Constitutional Court, Justice Albie Sachs, who always remind us that the Constitution of South Africa was not something that was given to us. It's something that culminated from years of struggle. You know, in fact, every South African must have a copy of the Constitution, a physical copy of the Constitution. Now, I often say to my students, I say it here in the University of the Western Cape, I say it in the 2 previous universities that I worked in, that the Constitution in South Africa is sovereign. Is sovereign. So, you know, when Christians say that the word of God is sovereign in their life, when people from the Islamic tradition say that the word and the messages of Allah and the Prophet, peace be upon him, is sovereign in their lives, that is what the Constitution is to the body politic of South Africa. I want to begin there. You know, so when we discuss the Constitution, we're not discussing an academic paper, we're not discussing Reverend Mabilane or Professor Pakeng's views. We're discussing something that is sovereign. I'll make an example. Recently, Advocate Dalimpofu says in court, quite flippantly, that if the Constitutional Court can decide that his name is no longer Dalimpofu, then his name is no longer Dalimpofu. And it sounds foolish, but if you think quite deeply about it, because of the sovereignty of the Constitution, of course, that is the truth. So that is what it is, and that is what it means to us now. 3 legacies of the Constitution that I want to speak about. One, the Constitution has created democratic visions, political stabilities by an effective system of separation of powers. So one of the things that the Constitution of the Republic has done is that even when there's a hung municipality, we'll talk about GNU now, even when there's a hung municipality in the previous local government elections, services continue. There's no disturbance of service delivery. There's no disturbance of the state architecture. Even now, with the African National Congress losing its majority, the sun did not fall out of the sky because the Constitution created a democratic vision that detailed what must happen when a majority loses power. But also, it created a separation of powers between the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. You know, so that's the first aspect of the Constitution and the legacy that we see. And it rings even more now that the African National Congress has lost its majority. The second is that the Constitution has placed itself as a social contract between the people and the state, mainly bringing about what we call the principle of legality. Now, the long and short of the principle of legality is that the state must not do anything that is outside of the law. So whenever the state or government or any institution of state does anything, it must draw it from the law. That's why when the president fires you from cabinet, he has to cite the Constitution, he has to say, from the powers given to me as the president or as the head of state in section this and that of the Constitution, I'm changing government. So that's the second part, that it bequeathed to us the principle of legality, you know. And then the third thing, but before I go to the third thing, so why is the principle of legality important? It means that unlike during apartheid or apartheid, the pronunciation depending on which primary school you went to, during apartheid, politicians could wake up in the morning and take a decision and say, this is what we're going to do, you know. So the whims of political actors were the order of the day. So in the new democracy, in the constitutional democracy, no head of state can wake up and say, I'm going to take pregnant teenage girls to Robben Island, because the constitution protects them. No bigoted, discriminatory, homophobic, transphobic political actor can use state power to discriminate against the LGBTQIA plus community. That's the second legacy. Then the third one, very quickly, the Constitution creates a buffer between the people and state power, and that is self-explanatory. Now, there are many criticisms, and I think I would need a paper, I would need a completely different webinar to talk about the criticisms. But one of the criticisms, the long-standing criticism of the Constitution, is that it comes after years of colonialism and does not respond to the fundamental question, the fundamental basis of colonialism, which is dispossession, right? So black people in this country were dispossessed. Land and property was stolen from them. Theft. So white people stole black people's property. And in 1994, or in the coming into being of the Constitution with Section 25 protects private property in very strong terms. So if a society based on theft, you get freedom, you get a constitution, and the constitution fails to resolve the question of theft. You know, one of the other legacies of the Constitution is that it disavows colonial horrors aesthetically and in language, you know. So it pretends as if apartheid didn't happen. It says we're committed to the injustices of the past without mentioning what those injustices are. So it constitutes a society on present denial of the facticity of apartheid. And why is this important? If you're a black person today and you talk about racism, we are frowned upon by your friends, by your colleagues. You risk even losing your job when you talk about racism, when you say that white people are racists, when you say that the spatial design of this country is racist. You know, why? Because the Constitution denies it. The Constitution doesn't say anything about apartheid and the racism of apartheid. So those are some of the criticism. Maybe the last one is the question of reparations. You know, and Tandi Kamalesi Ndebele, le reparation, ukuphezela. When the Jews are killed by Nazi Germany, the government of Germany pays Jews afterwards as a reparation to repair. You know, not a single black person has gotten reparations for 400 years of colonialism and the extremism of apartheid of 1948 to 1994. And this constitution is silent about that. So this constitution, with all its good things, expects us to forgive, forget, and move on where it matters the most. Now, let me conclude or pause here by saying some people, I said I'm going to end by the question that I expect first. Some people said maybe we need a national dialogue, and those people are wrong. Wrong. The one who have conversations that they failed to have in 1994. Those elders, His Excellency Thabo Mbeki is wrong. There's nothing that Thabo Mbeki can do in 2024 that he failed in his 9 or 10 years of being president and a further 5 years of being deputy president. So that national dialogue will not yield anything, because even those people who are calling for it are committed to the same capitalist, neoliberal, balderdash and claptrap that has been throttling us for the past 30 years. Let me pause there.
Thank you, Dr. Sindane, for taking us through your experience, and I think there'll be very few people who would disagree with you, especially in the things that you mentioned pertaining to our Constitution. Just a couple of questions. In terms of our Constitution, Doctor, do you think that it is all encompassing? And then within a framework of a reset situation, are there any aspects of it that you think can be amended, or is it cast in stone for time immemorial?
Well, I don't really, the notion of a reset, I don't really like it, because the reset, it fits into the exact crisis of 1994. Because in 1994, in fact, that's what happened. It was a reset. Let's start over. And starting over has the habit of forgetfulness of what happened before. So I don't think we should use the language of a reset. There must be a drastic and radical change in heart and in personnel. So that's why I don't agree with Professor Mamukiti Pakeng when she says that it doesn't matter who is in power. It's a question of power. When you have political power and you play with it, this is what happens in society. So it's a question of power. It matters to me who is in power. And if you are not going to talk about power, then forget about transforming society. All of society since time immemorial has been based on power. It is possible to amend the constitution, but it's very difficult because you need a 2/3 majority. And a 2/3 majority is incredibly difficult to get, But the constitution is not cast in stone. The beauty with this, the sovereignty of the constitution, unlike the Bible or the Quran, is that it's not cast in stone. So the word of God, and I'm not being blasphemous, forgive me, I'm not, and my students know that I'm not, I'm just drawing parallels. You can't change the Bible, you can't change the text of the Bible, but you can change the text of the Constitution. But the spirit of this Constitution is based on a refusal to accept that black people were done dirty, if I can use the language, I'm 2000. Is a refusal to accept that there's a need to repair and to bring back what was stolen from black people. So it's not cast in stone, it can be changed. In fact, some of us have been saying that perhaps what needs to be done rather, my English bundles are running out so early. What needs to be done is that the people need to come together and think about constituting a completely new polity without resetting, a polity that reflects these 30 years, that reflects the 40 years of apartheid, that reflects the 400 years of conquer.
Thank you for that, Doctor. Another question coming from YouTube, it's asking, how sovereign is our Constitution in terms of international law? What are the powers and statutes of limitations for a body like the World Bank? To what extent can they dictate our economical practices?
So in the Constitution, you have section 231, 232, 233, which quite interestingly I was teaching about just yesterday morning. And section 233 specifically, I want to read it, says, when interpreting any legislation, every court must prefer any reasonable interpretation of the legislation that is consistent with international law over any alternative interpretation that is inconsistent with international law. Now, 231 has got 5 subsections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I won't read it because of airtime and all of those things. But what this means is that one of the central characteristics of the Constitution is that South Africa is subject to international law. We kiss the ring of international law. We believe in international law as much as we believe in ourselves. That is why when international law says to us, we must arrest President Putin, when international law says that, according to this section, we've got no choice but to arrest him, even when it does not make political sense, even when it does not make personal, ideological, and historical sense to arrest a president from a country that has always been supportive to us, even during apartheid. You know, Section 233, and just to conclude, according to this constitution, we were compelled to arrest President Omar al-Bashir in 2015. You know, so IMF and all of those people, the moment we enter into an agreement with them, that is Section 231, the Constitution says we have no choice, we're forced, we're compelled by it. You know, forgetting, of course, the critique of third world approaches to international law, critique of scholars like Anthony Engi, Moshen Alata, James Kati, Makau Wamoto, who tell us that international law itself, the international setting itself, is not holy. In fact, it is complicit in our own apartheid. It is complicit in the injustices that you see in the world. I mean, just check the hypocrisy of international institutions. Russia invades Ukraine, there's an outcry. You know, channels are removed from the bouquet. We're told that we must sympathize with Ukrainians. The illegitimate state of Israel invades Palestine, and we're told that no, Hamas is a terrorist organization. Israel has got a right to defend itself. So this international law that our constitution says we must adhere to is itself racist, biased, and heavily skewed towards the interest of the capitalist class.
Yeah, that is very depressing, but very important to know in terms of the stakes and what we are up against. Last question for you, Dr. Sindane, is your take on the balance of powers between socio-political rights versus economic social rights in the developmental state. Where would you put more of a weighting on socio-political or socio-economic?
Yeah, well, you see, the political and civil rights are very much easy to attain. One man, one vote, very easy. But when it comes to the socio-economic questions, that is how it becomes very difficult, you know. But one of the things that I can say to you is that you can't legislate economic freedom. You can't legislate economic freedom, especially where there's no political will for economic freedom, or where there's no political dispensation for economic freedom. To have a developmental state, one of the things that you need to do is to speak quiet, not speak, but also do be very direct in changing the patterns, the modes of control of the economy, you know. So the economy of South Africa currently is very skewed, you know. It's owned by 7% of the population of South Africa. So those apartheid modes and patterns of control that still exist make it difficult for a constitutional dispensation that adheres to socio-economic justice, you know. So you can't legislate it when the economy is still in the hands of the descendants of settlers and their acolytes.
Dr. Sindane, thank you for your contributions and weighing in not only on things legal, but also things economical. Please stay with us just in case there are a few more questions for you at the end of the webinar. Thank you, Dr. Sindane. We're going to be engaging Dr. Pravin Semnarayan now, who's going to be talking to us about education, equality, and transformation. By way of introduction, Dr. Pravin Semnarayan has over 25 years of professional work experience across various industries. He has established NPOs to deliver community development in underprivileged areas, and he supports leading business schools and the Engineering Council in mentoring business and engineering professionals. Dr. Semnarayan's personal mission is to create and implement sustainable solutions that contribute to South Africa's growth. He's going to be speaking to us about the fourth industrial revolution, technology, job creation, and the youth. Dr. Pravin, the floor is yours. Please take us through.
Thank you, Ismaila. Good day, everybody. So I've got a presentation that will take us through, and the topic is technology. So we're talking about power and so forth. So we're talking here about a different power. We're talking about power of technology and what this technology can do for the youth of South Africa. So firstly, congratulations to SABC for using this digital media. I think with digital, we've seen now, it can have so much more, it create so much more access to people, and we can celebrate our 30 years, through this means in a much more easier manner. So congratulations for using the media for this event. In terms of my talk, so it's slightly different from the other speakers. I'm talking, so it'll be very much based on, technology, where we are positioned as South Africa relative to the globe, some of the benchmarks out there, and how do we learn from others, and how do we learn from ourselves in terms of what we've done well over the last 30 years, what are others doing, and how can we learn from them. And it's something that's actually, we can't ignore is the era, is where we are now, fourth industrial revolution, but generative AI, artificial intelligence, and where we are going to in terms of AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, where robots basically behave the same as human beings. We'll talk about the risks and opportunities. So in all of this, what are the risks that we face in terms of macroeconomic South Africa, and what are the opportunities for us? Because I strongly believe that with technology, if we are powered with technology, we can leapfrog many of these challenges that we have, in terms of education, agriculture, food security, and so forth. And what do we do going forward? So I think it's a very powerful tool that we should actually use, and it's becoming more and more accessible to us. So just overview of our firm, it's an AI solutions firm. We do software platforms and data services. It's part of a bigger group, but our focus is on technology. So where we are, unfortunately, over the last few years, our competitiveness as a country has dropped. Okay, so we can't ignore this. If we're looking now, we're sitting at number 60 out of 67. This is the latest survey done by IMD, and unemployment is high. Okay, and we are, in terms of competitiveness, if you look at this graph, Singapore is number one. So what is Singapore doing well? And they've been, in the top 3 consistently over the last few years. So how do we learn from them? What are they doing that we can learn from? So if you look at what Singapore has done, again, talking about AI and technology, they've actually embraced technology. So what they've done with technology, they've got an effort that's coordinated at all levels. They've got a national AI digital strategic plan. They've got those plans rolled down into sector levels or industry levels to company levels. Every company, even a small company, SME, has a digital transformation plan, and then that rolls down to the individual. The country itself has put in, money, lots of money to catalyze AI. So even and most of the money goes towards development of people to work in this technology-driven firms, that meets them. And the objective of all of this, what happens is, as a result of this, the competitiveness of the firms increase, the competitiveness of the industry increase, and competitiveness of the country increase. In terms of numbers, 17% of the GDP of Singapore is attributed to digital technology. So this is not only in terms of infrastructure. We need infrastructure. It's a must to have infrastructure in place. As South Africa, we've made strides now in terms of 5G and so forth. But in looking at the future of the world, you need strong infrastructure, because infrastructure is based on the internet, flow of data, and faster moving data. So they've prepared themselves in a coordinated fashion to use technology. If you look at risks where we are, this theme comes out throughout all the research and reports recently. Two main themes that come out from risks done internationally by the WEF, as well as risk analysis done by South Africa itself. Two main themes that's coming out in all of these reports is, again, technology, AI and technology, and sustainability. It's around the environment, what's happening to the environment, and so forth. On the environment, in South Africa, we have the renewable energy program that started around 2010. It's been hailed as one of the best in the world in terms of renewable energy program. It's solving the energy crisis that we have in the country, and that's something we can celebrate from. We can celebrate from, but also we can learn from. So we're tackling the net zero challenge. We're tackling renewable energy and the water challenges, but also we need to. This other big trend that's hitting us is AI and technology. So the South African report on risk, again, we can't ignore this. The big challenges we have in South Africa is infrastructure. We got challenges with energy. We got challenges with water, and we got challenges with logistics. So we need to find solutions. And if you look at the energy program, we've got a very successful PPP, IPP model that's worked in South Africa over the last few decades. And the similar can be applied to water to solve the infrastructure problems in water, as well as with logistics and rail infrastructure and so forth. So with PPP, private partnerships, we can solve these problems and build solid infrastructure. That's the basis that we need. On top of that, technology becomes the enabler for us to improve living standards, to improve food security, service delivery, and so forth. Skills development is the key. So how do we develop talent for the future and in the right areas? So that's our challenge. So it's been the last 30 years since apartheid. We've invested a lot. There's been some huge successes in South Africa that we can learn from. We've got, as again, reiterate, one of the best energy programs in the world. We've built, since apartheid, we've built a national identification system that initially was called Harness, Home Affairs National ID System, that later became integrated with the banking systems and other systems in South Africa. So that's amazing, integrated, world class. Our payment systems as well, accessible over since apartheid. Earlier on, if you remember, banking was not available to every person. Now banking is accessible, it's cheap, it's available. We're rolling out data, we're rolling out 5G. We've got a very mature telco infrastructure. And on top of that, there's more and more value-added services that we're rolling out. So we must celebrate the wins, we must learn from the wins, and tackle other sectors where there's challenges. If we're not prepared for technology as South Africa, you are living in an interconnected, networked world. You can't be isolated. You can't live in a bubble. We're gonna fall in competitiveness. If other countries invest in technology and we don't, we're already number 60. We don't want to fall further. We want to look up and what we can do about it. Cyber attacks can happen from anywhere around the world. We've got strong institutions in the country, but if we're not prepared for cyber attacks, they can attack all institutions, banks, and then we lose trust in those institutions. And there's a whole consequence of that. Big data, artificial intelligence, infringements of that lead to your privacy, civil liberties risks. AI, eventually, there's debate over how long it's going to take, but it's already, I'll speak just now about the types of jobs will change because of AI and technology. We're very sensitive to the digital divide and having divided society. So we need to make sure that there's proper access, there's education for everybody. So we narrow the divide. The one good thing with technology is accessible, it's cheaper than actually building infrastructure. So, and it's more, and everybody can use it. And there's access to education as well. So technology, with online education and so forth, there's more access to everybody to go and learn these tools. So there's other consequences in terms of AI, and we have to face the reality. It can affect your financial markets, and there's misinformation, disinformation, all could be created because of AI in terms of driving all of this, of media, driving news and so forth. So in terms of global context, what's happening in the world, the EU has already put in regulations to mitigate some of the effects of AI, and South Africa as well will have to put in these regulations to look at how to make the use of technology and AI safe for us, so there's no harm and how it's actually used. So generative AI, which many people know now as ChatGPT, which has taken off over the last year or so, late 2022, it became well known and being used. But that's just only the beginning, and already companies are starting to use it. So the nature of jobs are going to change. It's going to add more productivity and so forth. But look at the longer term, where we're going already, where we talk of artificial general intelligence, where robots have the capabilities. As we build more and more robots, as we have more self-driving cars, these robots learn from each other, and they get more and more intelligent. Okay, and there's no control. So this is all a reality that's actually happening now. So machine learning, grows exponential. So these are things that actually that's actually happening now. So we need to understand and see where all of the technology is taking us. Again, this is macro trends. Again, same two themes comes through: technology and environmental. Impact of jobs. So as a result of that, what do we do as the youth? So this topic, has been set up more for around the youth. What do? We have to. The jobs are going to be in this sector. So already we're seeing technology, digitalization, sustainability. So jobs are going to be. So we have to equip the universities, and there are some academics in the room. Equip ourselves in terms of sustainability, renewable energy, in terms of the engineering side of it, but also in terms of AI and data equipping. And there's more and more students that are taking it at university now, which is good, but we need a concerted plan to tackle this and to grow our talent in this area. So this survey is about the skills of the 2023 results. And the key results, the key skills that are required in terms of the job is analytical, creative thinking, resilience, the ability to learn all the time, keep abreast of technology, of new things that's happening all the time. So we speak of power, but I think this technology, we should not be afraid of the technology. I think, where we're coming from 30 years to where we are now, this can be an enabler for the youth. There's opportunities to use this. We've seen, in Africa and South Africa, where, there was no telephone infrastructure, but we moved away from putting new infrastructure for the old analog type telephones, and mobile take over. With mobile, you've got payments that work with mobile and so forth. So technology has offered us the opportunity to leapfrog some of the challenges in the services that we did not have in the past. So it's an opportunity for us to learn the technology, to use the technology to find applications, areas where there's no energy, for example, and now you can put in distributed systems. You can put a solar system with lithium-ion batteries, and you can power a community. Those types of things. So I think technology can give us amazing power. We've come a long way in terms of using it. There's been ups and downs in South Africa in terms of using it, but the hypothesis is, let's invest in this technology. All of us, should embrace it. Don't be fearful. Let's build our capability. At the same time, consider the risks for what this environment is about. Yeah. Thanks very much, Mr. Langa.
Thank you, Dr. Senna Ryan. Thank you for your insights. Just a few quick questions, Doctor. The world of work is always changing. How do you think we can prepare our youth that are not even in existence yet? Because you must agree that the advent of 4I are at different states of readiness, not only as a country but also demographically. So how do we, put our best foot forward and prepare our youth to take advantage of this seemingly a slippery slope of 4IR? Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah. So if you look at businesses in South Africa, already businesses in Africa are using AI, all right, and using technology. So some of the basic administrative jobs, like clerical jobs, those jobs in the future are not going to be there. All of these jobs are going to be taken by technology, right, and integrated systems. So as the youth, I think as a youth, we need to be computer literate. We need to, wherever there's access to learn technology, we have to make it central to our thinking, be able to use it. And there's so much of education out there. As I said, there's like Coursera, there's courses that's online, and the thing is, you can't be fearful. So I think doesn't matter what job you are, you have to learn how to use the technology. So it's about learning technology, and I think the youth, you got time. And technology is friendly to you. They learn it very quickly. They adapt to technology very, very quickly. It's a thing that it's so hard to learn. It's a difficult thing. It's not. It's so, and the more the AI becomes used, the more easier it is to use, to program, to learn how to use it, and so forth. So it's definitely a powerful tool. So that's something I would advocate is for the youth, and they have time. They must use technology.
No doubt, Doctor. It is a powerful tool, and I think that in order for our youth to be computer literate, they are struggling with basic things like access to data. Do you think that data would ever be free by those who make it?
There is a challenge for us as a country. Okay, if you look at some of the other countries around the world, like if you look at countries like India, data is virtually free. Okay, and that's one of the enablers we need to have. The infrastructure, the data infrastructure is so important. Okay, we've come a long way, but we're not there yet. So I think our data is still expensive compared to. We shouldn't be worried about the cost of data. We shouldn't be worried about having access to the technology. We need to learn how to use the technology. But that's something, as a state, we need to still do. We have made some improvements, but I think we're not there in terms of providing the enabling framework, in terms of providing low-cost data, the cheap infrastructure, and so forth. So that is our challenge.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor. Okay, and then Doctor, just lastly, the digital divide and poverty, because people in the rural areas, they don't have even access. So even them being able to participate, and I think that we come from from an economic, this is like a digital economy. We're coming from an intellectual economy, and now this is the digital economy. And we find that our youth who live in the rural areas, they can't even participate. How can we, create a bridge for them to cross over and join the rest of the world, as it were?
Yeah. I think that is true in some respects, but I think it's not true in all respects. I think I think we've seen, and I've personally seen youth from the most rural, areas, and they're inspiring stories. It's like we just think it's like and paint everybody with the same brush. The rule, I've seen kids that come through high school in the most rural of areas, okay, with limited access to infrastructure, do well in school, do well in maths and science and so forth, and end up at the top universities in the country doing mechatronics and the top engineering degrees. Okay, so I think there's, we can do more, but it's not all doom and gloom. That is nothing. All right, and I think so if there are means and there is access. All right, and we can't say because we don't have it, we now must go back to like a traditional type. We're stuck, and that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, which I think is wrong. There are a lot of enablers that we have in the country to enable the youth. All right, it's a mindset as well, in terms of, and there are lots of cases, and we've personally seen a lot of cases where the youth would absolutely, have done exceptionally well with limited resources.
No, you're spot on, Doctor. I mean, there are many exceptions, to the rule, even though they have made it against, somewhat tall odds. But it's not altogether lost. I think there's still a lot of opportunities, for the masses of our youth, to get involved in. And with that, Dr. Sinarayan, we've come to the end of the webinar. We've actually run out of time.
Thank you.
I'd just like to thank all the contributors. Your input has been invaluable. Really, really appreciated. And again, 1,000 apologies for our technical glitches at the top of the webinar. We really appreciate you for being patient and waiting with us. If I can bring on Yashika, the head of genre religion, to close the session. Again, my name is Nhlanhla Songwane, here from Factual, and I want to express my thanks again, not only from Chilidzi Davana, from the head of Factual, but also Yashika and other colleagues involved. Thank you so much, Yashika. The floor is yours.
Firstly, I would like to thank everyone for coming and joining us on the webinar today, and also to thank each one for their patience during the session this morning. We do apologize for some of the glitches that we've experienced, but again, technology can be an enabler, but a disabler as well. And it's about us learning, the route far more effectively. But what has struck me, Nhlanhla, today has been the caliber of such an amazing, webinar, where we've had people, firstly, that have come on, like, our doctors as well, Dr. Solima Bilani, Dr. Ntando Sindande. It was amazing to find Dr. Bacheng sharing the metaphor of the roots. And I think that's one of the single most important metaphor that I've come across in a long time. It's very easy to cover the soil with different types of plants when the roots itself is not weathered, when the roots itself is not given the opportunity to change and to grow. And it's a very critical thing that we need to understand as a country. Statistically speaking, we were just talking about television, and in this environment, there's 18.2 million households in South Africa, where 16.5 million people are viewing households. And 37.5 million people have viewed some kind of content in the past month or so from a television perspective or from an internet perspective. And coming back to the last speaker, do you know that 94% of our population have a cell phone? 69% have a smartphone. And it makes us think about access in a far different light in Klantla, so that where we have failed as a country in enabling people to understand what the Constitution can do for you and what we can do to change aspects of the Constitution to redress the imbalances of the past, because we have not done that effectively. And I think our speakers today have brought on such amazing points that we have to turn the soil, turn it out, rework who we are as beings in our country to touch the soil and to enable the soul to grow. And I think that's important. It's the level of soul development. And for me, one of the things that Solly Mabelane, thank you, Reverend, for joining us today, was the critical aspect of what public broadcasters have to do. We have to create the platforms for social commentary. If we don't do that and enable the discussions, people will not have the opportunity to hear what this beautiful document, the Constitution, has to offer and what we can do as a country to change the polity. So I think that's rather critical for us as the SABC, and to utilize the technology that we have available to tell our stories, to share our stories, so that we too can become part and parcel of the global space of progress. Incidentally, somebody mentioned like data is actually free in India, and it's considered one of the poorest countries in the world because it had 400 years of colonialism, thousands of years of oppression, but it had to rise in a way in the last couple of decades because the people decided to take ownership of their narrative. And one thing I've learned last week with producers from the DRC, because they've been facing with so much of genocide, people don't speak about that type of narrative, but they've decided to go back to roots, to change their stories, to tell their stories and enable the change from within. Because for too long, people waited for outside countries to come in. They waited for the Germans and the French. In the past, we know what happened with colonialist powers on the continent, but we can't wait for that. They've used mediums like technology to change the grade. Now they are standing up for themselves in spite of the challenges that is happening on this continent. And I believe that Africa is the beacon of light for humanity, and we need to push that narrative so that we own the space of change in South Africa. So I'd really like to thank each and every one of the speakers that has come through. You've given us a lot of thought. It is not the dream that was envisaged in 1994. We all had come from that journey. But the hallmark of who we are as a diverse nation is the skills that we can bring together to go forward and to build a cohesive society. Thank you. Can we go?
Thank you.
Yes, you can go. Thank you so much for your challenges, pearls of wisdom, and your invaluable contribution. Really appreciate it. Until we meet again, Nhlanhla Sangwane signing off. Goodbye.
Thank you.